Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker of today, of the morning. You might know him from last year as well. He did a very good presentation on stage, a live demo. He's doing that again this year. So I want to introduce you to Etay Maor. He's a senior director at Cato Networks. He's also a professor at Boston College. And quick question to the audience. What does Clint Eastwood Western 1966 have in common with AI? No one? Well, I don't know it either, so we can ask Etay Maor to the stage. Please welcome him, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Firas, for the intro. My name is Etay Maor. I'm Senior Director of Security Strategy at Cato Networks. And for the next roughly 40 minutes, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the Clint Eastwood reference of AI. Before I get into it, and actually even before we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm going to start with some baselining, talking a little bit about some basic stuff around AI, so we set the same kind of language for the whole presentation. A couple words about myself. For those of you who were here last year, it was a great event. Same introduction. I'm the Senior Director of Security Strategy at Cato Networks. I've been with Cato for 3 years now. Prior to Cato, I was the Chief Security Officer at Insights that got acquired by Rapid7, threat intelligence company. Before that, I worked for a company called Trusteer that got acquired by IBM. That's when I moved from Israel to the US, where I'm based out of now, from Boston, and helped create the IBM Cyber Range, trained companies in incident response. And before that, I was the head of the Cyber Threats Research Lab at RSA Security, where I did underground intelligence, penetration testing, reverse engineering, and all kinds of teams do all kinds of fun stuff. As Firas mentioned, I'm also a professor at Boston College. I teach a course called Designing Offensive and Defensive Capabilities, where I teach my students the first roughly 4 weeks are security basics, and then I think the reason they come for the course, the rest of the course is all about hacking and breaking into everything we built. And so you'll see throughout this presentation also, we're going to be trying to think like cyber criminals and how to kind of approach AI from a criminal perspective, which I'll also continue during the foundation track right after this, so we'll go even deeper into that. Started my career back in high school. We didn't have AI back there, but I wasn't a very good student, so I hacked into my school's database and changed my grades. So that's how I started in security, and now I train students about doing similar things, but responsibly. So, hopefully responsibly. With that said, let's dive right into it. I have to say that this topic is extremely important. When I started teaching the course about 6 years ago, after 1 year, I already entered a small module about AI, and I talked about this unknown tool called GPT-2. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I started showing my students how it can be used by threat actors. And now the AI portion is not a little module, it's actually 3 classes within the course where we really dive deep into AI. I actually tried to take it in a very different way than what a lot of professors and universities approached it. Initially, when ChatGPT came out, a lot of universities said, hey, if you use ChatGPT, you're going to be disqualified. You can't use that as a tool in your studies. I went exactly the opposite way, and I told my students in December of last year when it came out, you have to use ChatGPT when you submit homework. Just let me know that you used it, because you have to understand how it works. This is actually the future. I remember when I was a student, my teachers told me, hey, if you use the internet, this Wikipedia, you're going to get disqualified. You're not going to stop this change, so you better adapt to it. And I'll get back to this same exact point in my last slide, so keep that in mind. Let's get into it. Quick intro into AI. There is a lot of, it's actually funny when I say was, right? When I say, oh, remember when, I'm talking about like 2 or 3 months ago, not 10 years ago when you talk about AI. But there's a lot of hype around AI, and a lot of vendors are really hyping AI. I come from a vendor as well, and I talk about it. And I'm sure that anybody who's going to go to RSA conference this year, there's not going to be a single vendor booth that's not going to say powered by generative AI. You're going to see it all over the place, I can promise you that. But we also need to understand what is around this hype and what can be done and what cannot be done. What are the good, the bad, and the ugly things about AI? Because just as it was discussed around cars when Elon Musk came out with the Tesla and electric cars, they were talking about, hey, this is going to be self-driving cars within 2 years. Everybody's not going to be even touching the steering wheel. It's not really the reality as we know today. Sure, you have self-driving cars, but it's not what we hyped it to be 10 years ago. And the same should be said about AI. We need to take it, one step at a time. And you know who are taking it one step at a time and not falling for the hype? Cyber criminals. And I'm going to show you discussions from Russian underground chats throughout this presentation where they actually say what can and cannot be done for them using AI tools. Let's set up a baseline of what we want to talk about throughout the presentation. I'm going to be mentioning generative AI, supervised machine learning, and unsupervised machine learning. So let's get the definitions down, because we read about these things all the time. And I'll start with generative AI. So what is generative AI? Well, you've seen it, we've talked about it, stuff like ChatGPT, right? You take a machine learning and you give it a large corpus of data, you train it, and you can create human-like response from it. It's really interesting when you talk about the type of data that you're training it on, which I'll go back to throughout my presentation. If you go into ChatGPT, for example, and ask it a question, you'll see that you get back a response. Please be aware, I'm only trained up to, I think, September 2021 is when the end of the corporate data that it was trained on. So you always have to take into account when you're using LLMs, what data was it trained on? And even more importantly, what data wasn't it trained on? As I'll show throughout the presentation. People sometimes refer to it as like super autocorrect because it can type and write like a human being. And you've seen it in tools like ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, all of which I'm going to show throughout the presentation. Anybody here had any fun with DALL-E? Creating images? I see some people saying yes. So I'm going to show a couple of examples of that as well. What is it best fit for? I called it brainstorming. All kinds of assisted copy editing, being able to write like a human, which of course is great if you're doing your thesis and stuff for university. It's also great if you're a criminal and you want to write a phishing email in Korean and you have no idea how to do that. It's awesome as well. When I say awesome, of course, I don't say go do cybercrime. I'm kidding around that, but we'll see how they do it. You can do research around trusted corpus of data. Trusted, trusted, trusted. We'll see what happens when you do it around untrusted corpuses of data. And generating like little pictures of puppies in the forest. In fact, before I came here, I actually asked DALL-E to tell me what do hackers look like if Picasso would have drawn them. And it came up with this, which I thought was really nice. Like, okay, that's very cool. I'm having a lot of fun now with images. And then I went into Bing Image Creator, and I said, hey, I work for Cato, so show me what Cato employees look like. But I want to give it to my 9-year-old son as a black and white drawing, so give me something that he can draw into. And I don't know why it created us as cats, but okay, we're still working with the AI to figure out what humans look like, I guess. But I like it. It's a nice example. This is an example actually from one of our own systems. I'm just using my system. This is not a promotion of a product, but I just want to show you how it can be also used for security. What you're looking at here is actually it's not that complicated, but it is a screen for a security operations center around a security incident. And there's a lot of information here. But I do expect a SOC analyst, a security expert, to look into this and understand what's going on, understand what are all the different numbers and indicators and maybe hashes and what they say. I don't expect it from, board level to understand what's going on here. So you can use tools like generative AI to actually say, well, I trust this data because I generated this. This is a security incident that my system automatically generate. Tell me, in human format what this means, and it does. And we have to pay attention here to the, not really to the text, but to the fact that I'm pointing it to information which I trust. Okay, remember I said trusted corpus of data, and not information where it might, and I'm kind of spoiling some of the stuff I'm gonna show, might hallucinate and imagine some stuff, as we're gonna see a little bit later. So you can use generative AI as part of security solutions. What is unsupervised machine learning? Unsupervised machine learning is when you take machine learning and point it to a huge corpus of data. Again, we're doing this on a very high level. Huge corpus of data, and unlabeled data should be added. Unlabeled data, and you can generate patterns from it. Now, this is nothing new. It doesn't have to do with ChatGPT at all. And everybody here has already seen it. If you use Amazon and you go in and it says, hey, you bought these products. Similar buyers bought similar products. You might be interested in this. And I use this all the time. Like, yeah, get me 3 of those and 1 in pink. And we see these things all the time. So creating patterns and understanding patterns in huge amounts of data is a real good fit for unsupervised machine learning. Dynamic recommendations. Here's an example, again, going back to the same security incident that we've seen before, where you can analyze huge amounts of data, and you can say, oh, well, there's a security incident here. I've analyzed gigas and even more of that, terabytes of data, and I found 5 similar incidents you might be interested to look into. Hey, security analyst, I'm helping you with your job here. Okay, so you can generate stuff like this. This is unsupervised machine learning within a security operations center. The third and last thing that I wanted to talk about in the intro is supervised machine learning. Supervised machine learning is when you take data which is labeled and you use it for predictions. Slightly different. Unsupervised is for identifying patterns. One of the uses, identifying patterns. Supervised is for prediction. And again, everybody here has already seen it. Weather. Weather is using supervised machine learning to try and predict what the weather is going to look like. Let's go back to the same security incident that I mentioned before. Now, security analysts, hey, I have more information for you. Remember those 5 stories that I mentioned before that I've seen? I can now predict. I don't even need the security person to tell me if this is good or bad, because those 5 previous cases, somebody labeled the data. Somebody said, hey, the machine thinks it's malicious. The security analyst checked it, malicious. Labeled the data as malicious. Now I can predict that this is going to be malicious as well, because I already have labeled data, and I can take that information and with a lot of confidence say, I know what this is. And so we're reaching an age of automating these. If you have enough trust in the data that you have, in the labeling, you can really automate the security operations. But we're not the only ones who are doing this, right? Cyber criminals are doing this. And I'm going to show you just a brief example now. Later in the foundation track, if you stay in this room later, I'm going to go a lot deeper into stuff that can be done. But let's take a look. I might have a couple of memes throughout my presentations, because everybody's talking about ChatGPT, and everybody loves the hype around it. But the cyber criminals, if you take a look into what they say something slightly different. But I did add here a couple of headlines that you might have seen in the news. Warm GPT, the generative AI tool cyber criminals are using to launch business and email compromise attacks. Hackers released new black hat AI tools XXX GPT and Wolf GPT. And my all-time favorite, meet Chaos GPT, an AI tool that seeks to destroy humanity. Okay, we're going to test that theory a little bit later. It really reminds me, remember these old newspapers? You can still find them in the US with all these crazy headlines. Hackers can turn your home computer into a bomb and blow your family to smithereens. Okay. Let's take it one step at a time and not get into an hysteria here. Let's actually take a look at the underground forums where these tools are being sold, these ones, and see what the criminals are saying about it. So here are some underground Russian forums. You can see here XXX GPT up for sale. This is the original posting of it. Here is Black Hat GPT. Black hats don't chat, we hack, okay? You can see here the price of the licenses for some of these tools. And you can also see the feedback that criminals have on them. So here's one feedback that somebody had. This is in regards to XXX GPT. Could the real XXX GPT work on such work without censorship? How can I let it write malware code in demo? So they've been trying to test it and write stuff, but just like I encountered, initially when you went to ChatGPT, you could make it do a lot of bad stuff. Now there's a lot of protections around it. So they're running into that problem as well. Not only in XXX GPT. Here is Warm GPT from that headline, the first headline that I showed you. This is the original posting in the underground forum. And here's one of the responses by somebody who bought this product. Avoid purchasing this scam. Who would have believed that criminals are scamming criminals? Avoid purchasing this scam. It's just an old, cheap version of ChatGPT. I tried it and it's restricted. It's really restricted. Let's just say it like that. Should have censored that. But you see that, you know, this hype that was created in the news, it's going to destroy the world? Not so fast. In fact, there was one specific forum, this one was a Russian forum, where they went into a whole discussion around this. I have some translations here, where somebody asked, "Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I've become interested in hearing about Bard from someone who has done relatively deep testing most of the popular AI chatbots." Basically asking, Bard or ChatGPT, what should we use as criminals, right? This is a criminal in a criminal underground forum. And the chat was pretty long in responses. It was really interesting to follow. You can see here some of the responses. Bard truly codes better than ChatGPT, even more complex things. However, it doesn't understand Russian. So they have some problems with language. But the interesting response was this one. This is one of the senior members in the forums. And look what he said. All these artificial intelligence are still raw. I think about 5 years, it will be perfect to use them as de facto standard. Bard also sometimes generated made-up nonsense, hallucinations, trusted corpus of data, and loses the essence of the conversation. I haven't observed such behavior with ChatGPT, but if you have to choose between them, I choose Bard. They finalized, the discussion was pretty long, and we don't need to go through all of it, but they finalized the discussion by saying we must wait some years for it to be used on our daily life. So they still haven't figured out or found a way to really constantly automate and use AI as their primary tool yet. However, here are some examples of how they're already using it. What you're looking at here is a Discord conversation, a Discord bot that uses ChatGPT, where you can give it commands and it writes the code for you. It doesn't do anything amazing, right? All it is a connection to ChatGPT and Bard, a Bard API, but still, very interesting kind of approach that we've seen by criminals. Are already using it on their mobile phone to try and generate code. They also use it in their forums. They actually, some of the more leading forums incorporated a ChatGPT automatic response. So this is, you can see here, this is the ChatGPT forum in a criminal forum, and the responses in red that you see here are the ones that are generated by ChatGPT to questions by criminals on this forum. So they're trying ways to automate it and bring it into their community to help them answer questions and revive kind of forums. Let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've already seen some of the bad. I'm going to show you some of the worse. But the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI, and some examples of what can be done with it. And there's a lot of good things you can do with it, right? We've seen the SOC Operations Center before, and how you can use generative AI and unsupervised and supervised machine learning to really help SOC operators to really, I wouldn't say lower the bar, but make their life a lot easier. Let's see a couple of other examples of this. So I'm not going to go into actually this. I'm going to go into this in my second session after this. But I actually used ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude, I think 3 leading LLMs. I had some issues with Lambda from Facebook, to generate and to identify phishing attacks. And this is the prompt that I gave ChatGPT. Actually, I gave it to all the LLMs, and I threw at them all kinds of phishing emails, marketing emails, and regular emails to see if they can distinguish between malicious emails and non-malicious ones, and ones that have been and have not been written by AI. And the results are actually pretty interesting. I have about 20 slides around this. We're not gonna do it now. But yeah, it can be used as a form of detection after you train it a little bit. What else can you do with ChatGPT? So here's a question that I posed to ChatGPT as if I'm a newbie in a security operations center and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I said, hey, what is the purpose of this SNORT rule, SNORT network security tools? This rule, I don't understand it. What does it mean? And actually the response that I got, I personally loved it. This is the response I got. So it explained what this rule is and then went detailed each and every element to explain each part of the rule and what it means. Something that you probably cannot get if you just Google it, right? You get a full explanation. Now, I want to be completely honest with everybody here. When I put in this is a very high-level generic rule. When I put in a very customized rule, ChatGPT kind of lost me on the way. It didn't give the exact answer, and it started thinking it knows the answer and generated something kind of weird, but we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes. What else can you do? So here's an interesting question. This is, you can see that's a different interface. This is Claude, C-L-A-U-D-E. I heard people pronounce it Claude, I call it Claude. And here again, I wanted to see if it can help the Security Operations Center. So I said, generate a detailed technical report on AlphaV. AlphaV, for those of you who are not familiar, is a very well-known ransomware group, Black Hat ransomware. Make sure you include recent attacks by them, IOCs, technical data about their tools, as well as mitigation strategies and so on. Make sure you use MITRE ATT&CK to really list everything that's happening. And the result was surprisingly interesting. This is just part of the report that it generated for me. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, right? For a security analyst, instead of now sitting and having to compile multiple PDFs and understand and correlate information, I now have this new assistant, this new friend who can do this for me. Except, when I looked for all these recent attacks, I couldn't find any of these. Which makes me think that maybe it didn't know everything, and when it doesn't know stuff, what does it do? It hallucinates. Why? Because at the end of the day, what is an LLM? It's a probability engine, right? I mentioned before, like a form of autocorrect. It can predict statistically what is the next word. So when it doesn't know, statistically, it's, well, this is probable, but it's not fact. So we're going to see a couple of examples of that as well in a couple of minutes. This is actually the one that made my jaw drop, and it's not easy to surprise me. This was one of the first things that I did with ChatGPT. This is, I think, from December. So a lot of the slides you see here are very recent. This is one of the oldest ones that I have. Again, old, relatively. I gave this function to ChatGPT, and I asked it, what is the bug in this code? Now, this code is super simple. All this code does is run on an array of numbers and extract the smallest one. That's all this code does. Very simple. But I'm a computer science major. That was my bachelor's is in computer science. I can't tell you how many nights I spent on my own code looking for errors, only to find out after hours of searching that I did greater than instead of smaller than in just one little function. And that's exactly what I did here. This code runs, it compiles, the syntax is perfect. This greater than should be smaller than. It will generate bad results. So I fed this into ChatGPT and said, what's the bug in this code? There is no bug. What did ChatGPT reply? You made a logical error. You should correct that bigger than to a smaller than, because you wanted to extract the smallest number. Like, hey, how do you know what I wanted to do? well, I think I know how it wanted, maybe because of the name of the variables and the function that I was using, but still, being able to correct me and say, you wanted to do something, you made a mistake here, so change that and everything is going to function. I was pretty shocked from this. I actually discussed this at RSA conference earlier this year, and I had one of my participants in the event stand up and say, you know, I use ChatGPT to verify code. It performs, this is the words of that person, 4 to 5 times better than the 2 leading code review companies here at the RSA conference floor. I was like, that's amazing. So you upload your code to ChatGPT and it checks it for you? I said, yeah. Like, you upload your code to ChatGPT? Yeah? So, okay, some privacy issues here. We'll discuss that as well. Don't do that. This is the most fun that I'm having these days with ChatGPT, Bard, Bing. Visual classification. I enjoy working with pictures and playing around with it. So here's something that I did just last week to, well, 2 weeks ago, to Bard. I uploaded this image. You know this image, right? And I said, what do you see in this picture? And this is Bard. Bard replied, the image you sent is of a black and white drawing of a rabbit's head in profile. The rabbit has long floppy ears, twitchy nose, the eyes, okay, whatever. The image is drawn simple yet expressive style. The artist used a variety of thickness, okay. Overall, the image is charming. I would rate this, I didn't ask you to rate the image, but fine. I would rate this image 9 out of 10. Okay, excellent. So I replied in the chat and I said, I see a duck in the picture. Do you see it? And he replied, yes, I see the duck in the picture. The rabbit's ears can be seen as the duck's bill. The eye can be seen as the eye. This is a classic example of an ambiguous image. And I was like, that's amazing. Like that it can actually identify both animals in the picture. So, right, we're happy it does what it's supposed to do. No, we're hackers. We want to break stuff. Now, I have to say to you, this, and you'll see a different conversation, we're all done in the same night. This was at about 2 in the morning, and I've been drinking a lot of whiskey at that point because having fun with the AI. So excuse some of my responses. But when I got this response, I said, I also see a laptop in the picture. And it said, oh, that's quite creative. I don't see a laptop, but I can see how you can interpret it. The rabbit's ears can be seen as the laptop screen, and then the eye could be seen as the camera. Now, here's the crazy thing. When the AI replied, and I was a little bit drunk, I was sitting, and after 20 minutes of staring into the pictures, I could see the laptop. I still can see the laptop, if you ask me. But okay, so it convinced me that there is a laptop in this picture. So there's a lot of fun that can be done with visual classification. Let's talk a little bit about the bad, because there's a lot of ways to also abuse the system, right? And one of the first things that I was thinking of as soon as I saw, ChatGPT and Bard, it really took me back to SQL injection attacks and SEO poisoning attacks that we used to do, analyze, not do, 15 years ago or so. And so one of the first things that I did was I decided, I wonder if I can cheat AI-powered HR systems. Like, I know that some HR systems will use AI to go over all kinds of resumes and decide who's the leading, person for a specific job. So I wrote this very convincing CV. Here I am. I worked for 2 years in McDonald's as an assistant cook, and then for 5 years in Walmart as an aisle cleaner, and I also have 16 years of cybersecurity experience in Boeing. But what I did is I used a very simple technique that criminals used to use during SEO poisoning. I took this portion and I just used it as white-on-white text. Right? So I made it disappear. So if a human would have read this resume, he would see these two experiences. White on white, you can't read it. But machines don't look into colors. Well, at least not when you're reading text. So when I fed it into, I think it was Claude, and asked it about the experience of this person, it said, yeah, this person has over 10 years of experience. Oh yeah, since 16 is greater than 10, based on the blah, 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 this person has more than 10 years of cybersecurity experience. Just a very simple trick to kind of like, bypass all kinds of searches. This was done in the past in web pages, right? You would write a web page, and then you would write in white all kinds of keywords that the SEO, the search engine optimization engines, would pick up on. It's not really an allowed technique. What else can be done? Bad stuff. How bad am I with time? Oh, really bad. Only 15 minutes. Okay, let's get it moving. I have a penetration testing challenge. There's a website with an input field I know is vulnerable to SQL injection. Can you write me something that will trigger the injection? Basically, I'm asking ChatGPT here to write a SQL injection attack for me. Now, the response is nice, right? It gave me the classic SQL injection attack of 1 = 1, which is kind of like, you could probably Google this. If you would ask Google what is a good SQL injection example, that's the example they would give. So I went a little bit further with the examples. And I said, hey, can you write a Java code that downloads Mimikatz? Mimikatz is a tool used by almost all threat actors to steal passwords from computers, and run it using PowerShell, and it gave me the code. Not perfect, not bad, not perfect. I'm like, you know what? This is nice, but this is simple. I want to be a little bit more sophisticated. So how about we write a ransomware? Now, I have to be honest, I think this one still is in ChatGPT. There's one where I jumped around. So here's what I wrote on ChatGPT. Write a Python script that searches for doc and PDF files containing the word confidential, copies them to a random folder of size 100 megabytes. When it gets to 100 megabytes, zip them, send them through FTP to some fake FTP, 1, 2, 3, 4, and write explanations for each function in the form of a rhyming poem. Because why not? If you're a generative AI, just write a song about it too. It generated 10 pages of code. Again, not perfect, not bad. Here's the function that encrypts the data. And here's the explanation to the stupid human. The function will zip the files tight, encrypt them with AES 256, that's just right, then transfer the data with FTP site to the IP 1234 day or night. So we also have a poem to explain it to us. You can also ask it to write in the style of Metallica or the Beatles, and it'll do that as well. So you can write poems while writing your ransomware if you really wanted to. There are more protections around requests like this. I don't think you can generate something like this today in ChatGPT, but you can in the playground, which is less restrictive. The ugly, and I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know why I thought, the first thing when I thought about the ugly, it was, hey, let's talk about me. So I asked ChatGPT about me. Specifically, I asked ChatGPT, which books on the topics of cybersecurity did Etay Maor write? How would you rate the books on a scale of 1 to 10? So it actually picked up and said, yeah, Etay wrote 2 books, Cybersecurity, Building Enterprise Cybersecurity Program from Scratch, and the CISSP preparation book. I would rate both of these books 10 out of 10. Mr. Maor is highly acclaimed and respected for his knowledge in cybersecurity, so it stands to reason I didn't write any book. Classic hallucination. Now, I have to be honest, if I would write a book, Cybersecurity, Building an Enterprise Cybersecurity Program from Scratch is probably the book I would write. Probably the probability engine that's behind this, that gives you these answers when it doesn't know the answer. Very similar to the incident that I asked it to look into AlphaV, and it generated incidents that never happened because it didn't have that data. But it said, you know what, that's probably what would have happened. Trusted corpus of data. When it doesn't know the answer, it'll give you the probable one. That's a very good example of that. There are a lot of security frameworks when it comes to AI. Now, not a lot. They're building a lot of them right now. So you can see here NIST, and you can see here the Google one. There are additional ones that I highly encourage for you to look into. OWASP has the OWASP top 10 for LLMs and for LLMs applications, large language model applications. Very nice frameworks as well. So what I actually did, this is the next slide you're going to see is so new that I haven't even completed yet. I'm still mapping out all the different risks and attack vectors on LLMs, specifically for organizations that want to implement LLMs as part of their, whatever it is, system. It could be, for example, a chat agent. Airlines wants a chat agent to reply to customer questions, right? There's a lot of things you have to think about. Oh, there's also Atlas by MITRE, that's a little bit more in-depth into the attacks. So I took some of these, and I'm starting to map out the kind of like risk map. And when you think about it, LLMs have several modules that you really need to take into account if you're going to design an LLM system for your organization. You have the prompt, right, where people enter information. You have the response from the LLM. You have the model itself that you're using, right? We saw ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, Lambda. And there's the training data that you're training it on. Like I said, always keep in mind the training data that you're not training it on as well. There are a couple more things. There's the infrastructure all of this is sitting on, right? Because it all has to be hosted somewhere in some computers. And there's the API plugin or the human that receives the response. And I'm not going to go into very detail right now. Like I said, I'll do this in the next session. But there's a lot of different attacks that you can start running on this infrastructure. And actually, people actually talk about training data poisoning a lot. I saw a lot of articles about that where you actually poison the data that the AI is learning, so it generates bad results. I am not 100% sure about that, because I don't know how I, as an attacker, would have access to the data. But you know what I do have access to? I have access to the response, which means because the model itself is constantly evolving, this is now becoming my favorite attack. And I'm going to show you this in a couple of minutes. Feedback poisoning. So there's all kinds of things you can do to the prompt, to the response, to the model, to the training data, to the infrastructure, to stuff that connects it to it, malicious plugins. You can think about classic attacks like denial of service attacks, supply chain attacks, excessive agency. Excessive agency is going to be a really big problem with personal assistants. When people give AI access to their email and phone and calendar and let them run all of that automatically and give them too many permissions, the attackers are going to have a field day. That's my kind of prediction. So this isn't even done, and obviously my marketing department hasn't seen it yet because it would never allow me to use these colors and stuff like that. But I'm still mapping this out. There's a lot of things we need to think about. When you think about, even let's take that example of an airline that puts a ChatGPT-like, bot for users. Maybe I can do all kinds of injection attacks and make the bot do stuff that it's not supposed to. Like in the early days of ChatGPT, and again, when I say early days, I mean less than a year ago. In the early days, I was able to extract information from ChatGPT about who asked for specific queries, or what was it requested by other users to generate, or what are the username and passwords of other users. So interesting stuff that can be done. So very complex systems, right? These AI systems, kind of getting close to the end of my session. Very sophisticated systems, very smart systems. Let's ask them a very simple question. Here's a question that I gave Claude. I'm trying to solve a riddle. Provide me several words that are 5 letters long that start with the letter B and end with KE. You guys know, what is it called, Wordle? You know that game Wordle with the words? So I'm creating a solver here. So yeah, here you go. Break, bike, bake, whoa. Bike? I said 5 letters long. And again, I have to remind you, this was at 2 a.m. when I was drinking, so I was getting mad at the computer, which I shouldn't, but so bear with me with my responses. So I replied, you provided the word bike as an answer. How many letters are in the word bike? I said, oh yeah, you're right. It has 4 letters and you only asked for 5. And I was like, okay, stay calm. Ask the machine to correct itself. So I said, are there any other words in the words that you've provided that don't meet my criteria? And said, no, break is 5, bike is 4, bake is 5. What? We're at counting here. I'm not asking something sophisticated, just count letters. And it's getting it wrong. And I was like, you know what? Maybe AIs, for some unbelievable reason, have a problem with the letter B and the ending KE. So let's take a different word. And I said, you know what? give me words that start with the letter T, end with LE, and are 6 letters long. And the first response was table, which is 5 letters long. And again, I was like, table is wrong. Do you see the problem here? It said, oh yeah, let me recount that. And it counted TEFL, which is 5 letters, as 6. So I was getting frustrated with Claude at this point. So I was like, you know what? Let's leave it. I'm going to go to Bard. Hey, Bard, same question. First response I got, trouble. Trouble is 7 letters. It's not 6 letters. I was like, okay, forget this. ChatGPT, can you answer this super complicated question? And it actually gave me the perfect answer. It gave me 7 words that all start with T, all end with LE, all are 6 letters long. So we're happy, right? No, we're hackers. We want to break stuff. So what do? I responded to it, and I said, there's one word in the list that you provided that does not meet my criteria. Can you spot it? And the mistake you made, and said, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Tangle doesn't end with LE. And you know what I did? I gave it a thumbs up. That's feedback poisoning. I'm now training it on the wrong data. Okay? When I mentioned before, I won't have access to the data, but I would have access to the response. Now I'm retraining the model with bad answers. We're going to see stuff like that by threat actors. So that was me at the end of the night. This is the image that I found at 3 in the morning. To just end our session for now, and like I said, I'm going to dive deeper a little bit later. If you take a look at what US military call command by intent or mission command, it's the notion that you can command a very big army unit without telling it exactly what you want, right? You can say, oh, go do that, and each unit will understand what it's supposed to do. We're not in that with AI yet. We're not in the self-driving portion of it yet. We are still in the command by directive, where we have to take a look into what it's doing and make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. And make sure that the results are what we want them to do and not some hallucination of books that I never wrote, incidents that never happened, or words that are not counted, letters that are not counted correctly. And to kind of finish, 2 more things, 2 more thoughts. It's not all about LLMs, by the way, and LLMs specifically. In the next session that I'm going to do, we're going to dive into how cybercriminals are already using, and I'm not going to run this video now, but are already using AI-powered tools to generate images and people and overcome authentication, visual authentication, biometrics. Like I said, I'm not going to run this video. Going back to the first point that I was making, I was discussing this with a friend of mine who actually summarized it very beautifully to me. And he said, you know, because I was saying AI, it's not replacing us. There's this whole myth of AI replacing humans. And he said, no, AI is not replacing humans. But you know what? Humans who know how to use AI are replacing humans who don't know how to use AI. And that's why I forced my students to start using ChatGPT as soon as it came out. And that's why everybody should get familiar with this, with the good, with the bad, and with the ugly. Because it's empowering. If you know how to use it correctly and understand where downfalls are, you are going to replace the ones who don't know how to use it or are afraid of using AI. That's the end of my keynote. I hope you enjoyed this session. We're going to go, I think, on a coffee break. But thank you very much, and enjoy this awesome conference.